I can.
It's a local scrap man coming around playing music. Here we go, we're live. Look at this. So, good afternoon. It's 2 o'clock on a very warm July afternoon. Outside in sunny Stoke, in the sun, it was 40.7 a minute ago, and in the shade, 36.9. And the scrap man's out there making a racket just as we start. Never mind. Um, we're talking today to Adrian Hide. It's our secondary stream of the day. We're getting good at this. But this is, I was talking to Adrian a while ago about his business, and he commented to me, it's like a get out of jail free card for CEOs. And I went, oh, well, that sounds really interesting. Adrian, welcome. Tell us about your business.
Yes, I'd love to, Roy. So my business, I'm a driver risk management consultant. And when I tell people that, they look at me as if to say, what on earth does one of those do then? So essentially, I promote safer driving in the workplace. So I work with businesses where the controlling mind of that business says, do you know what? We accept driving as a high risk activity. We want to do everything we possibly can to keep our staff safe. Why wouldn't I want to do that as a responsible employer? We care about the people that we employ. And do you know what? If I can meet my legal obligations at the same time and keep myself out of prison if something goes horribly wrong, yeah, let's have a conversation. So that's essentially what I do. I work with businesses to help them manage the driver risks in their business.
And that's tremendous. And I've got all the windows open, and I've got the scrap man driving up and down with the speaker on, going any old iron. And so I hope he doesn't irritate things too much. I mean, you know, if it was that important, there'd be hundreds and hundreds of you, but there isn't. There's only you, so can't be that important, right?
Yeah. What I do is highly specialised and very niche, and niche is very often good. But I suppose I'm that little secret that you've not heard about. One of my favourite sayings is, "You don't know what you don't know," and most businesses would possibly be blissfully unaware that they actually have a legal responsibility to manage driver safety. And you know what, Roy? If nothing goes wrong, then they'll go throughout their life being none the wiser. But if something was to go horribly wrong, and the incident is serious enough to warrant an investigation, let's say by the police authority, that's the point at which reality dawns, and all of a sudden, what they don't know comes to bite them in the bum. So they get asked for all the different practices, policies, procedures, and stuff that really they should have had in place that they probably won't have done, mainly because they didn't know what they didn't know.
And that's really interesting. So I've worked with some of the biggest organisations in the world that as an employee, and I remember going on some right weird and wonderful training from everything from advanced driving, defensive driving, and anti-kidnap driving. That was an interesting one.
Yeah.
But that was all I did. I did the training course. Well, you're not about training courses, are you?
No, I mean, I'd like to get people to visualize good driver risk management is a little bit like a jigsaw puzzle. If you were to slice up the components of good driver risk management and put them into individual jigsaw pieces, when you piece them together, you have a really good, robust governance over driver safety in the workplace. In reality, what happens with a lot of businesses, they have two or three of the pieces of that jigsaw. Maybe they have a few more, but then they are handed out to different people in the business. And very rarely do those pieces of the jigsaw puzzle come back together. And if they do, some have got lost, some have gone up the vacuum cleaner, out the window, and all sorts. So there's a lot that a business needs to do to manage driver safety properly. It involves quite a few people, but the key thing is it needs somebody in authority in the business to grasp this by the horns and say, right, I'm going to take responsibility. I'm going to be the champion. Might not necessarily be the person that does everything, but I'm certainly going to make sure it happens.
So what size company is this about? I mean, what size company should be listening to us at the moment?
Yeah, well, do you know what, Roy? Health and safety is everybody's responsibility. So me as an individual, I'm the only person in my business. I have a duty to myself, my family, other members of the public. But as a business, until I reach 5 or more employees, I don't have to have a documented health and safety program in place. Once you hit 5, the landscape completely changes with HR and GDPR and health and safety and all sorts of stuff. And if your business have anybody who drive as part of their work and you've hit that 5 or more employee threshold, then your health and safety management must include the risks associated with your driving activities. And in my experience, I have a lot of time for my health and safety professionals out there in the world. They do a great job at keeping people safe in the workplace. But what I tend to find is that driving is that little bit of their job that are thinking, well, we know driving is a risky activity. We know there should be stuff in place. And very often it amounts to a few bullet points in a staff handbook, or there's an attempt at a policy. And of course, I look at it with a very, very different lens. I'm looking at it thinking, okay, if something were to go horribly wrong for this business and they land themselves in court and got the prosecution there saying, now, Mr. Business, just explain to me why. Can I see? Why do you do this? How do you do that? I want to make sure that they've got a really robust program in place. So essentially, it's 5 or more employees if any of those people drive, and it matters not whether they drive their own vehicle for work purposes or it's a company provided vehicle. Responsibilities are the same. And 5 or more employees, then that business has a legal duty to manage driver safety.
That's really interesting. So thinking about it, if I wanted, as a rank amateur, say I got 6 people, as a rank amateur who didn't know how to do it. Typically, where would I get my information from? Well, let's say Adrian wasn't here. Where would I get my information? Because I'm guessing what you do is good for England, Scotland, Wales.
Yeah, it's anywhere in these shores. To be fair, places like Southern Ireland, they'll have some slightly different rules, but nonetheless, managing driver safety in the workplace is pretty much standard, not just in the UK but the world over. Obviously, there's legislation in the UK that's slightly different, but I would be happy to work with any business that has an interest in having a safe driving culture, regardless of where they are.
That's got to be. That just makes a lot of sense. But why? If I wanted to do it myself, I probably wouldn't, as the leader of the company. But if I sort of pointed at someone to say, you're now in charge of this, and there's no such thing as Adrian, what sort of time would it take them, and how would they confirm that they've actually ticked all the boxes?
Just going back to that, you don't know what you don't know. Very often when I'm working with people that develop websites and stuff like that, they'll say, oh, we need to, you need to do SEO and you need to do this because, people are going to not be able to find you. Do you know what? Nobody's going to wake up one morning and say, do you know what? Today, I'm going to sort out my driver safety. So what people search for it's very, very hit and miss. But let's imagine you've had a conversation on the golf course. Your golf buddy has just said, you know what? I'm having court next week. We've had a nasty crash. You're going to go back to the office and think, I need to get something sorted out. So you might start to search on the internet for things like driver safety, driver training, driver policies, license checking, health and safety for driving, and you'll get all sorts of stuff coming up written by different people. There are some charitable organisations in the UK who will give you access to a library where you can download loads of stuff. And then you get this stuff on your table and think, okay, how do I make this fit for my business?
Yeah.
So for me, and helping you, Roy, would be to first have a conversation. What parts of those jigsaw puzzle do you already have? Which bits don't you have? Which bits have you lost? And how can we rebuild that picture and get that box on the jigsaw puzzle and get your health and safety again?
So it was a thing. This title scared the living crap out of me. CEO, get out of jail free, a sliding doors moment. And first off, you mentioned jail, which I wouldn't do good in jail. I'm not designed for that. My culinary needs are better than what you get in the high security establishments.
Yeah.
Sliding doors moment. I mean, I've seen the film, Gwyneth Paltrow and the other guy, whoever that was. I don't know. But how does it link? What's so there's get out of jail free. I mean, you, there's got to there's no examples of a CEO going to jail because they didn't have this, right?
Well, there are actually. There are
Oh,
actually. If I would imagine there'll be quite a few people on this call today will probably remember the Bath tipper truck incident that happened a few years ago, and this is where a business suffered a very serious collision. Unfortunately, 5 people lost their lives, and the investigations that took place determined that the mechanic failed to carry out his duties properly and service the brakes of the vehicle. So as a result of that, going to court, the owner of the business got a custodial sentence of 7 years and 6 months under the corporate manslaughter law. His mechanic, because he failed in his duty of care, he got a custodial sentence of 5 years, 3 months for gross negligence manslaughter. So yeah, so the guy that was in charge of the business should have made sure that his staff were doing their job properly, and as because they weren't, he ended up with a prison sentence. There's another case on Google. If you Google renowned consultants, you'll see plastered all over pages and pages and pages of Google about their whopping £750,000 fine that they got. So yeah, it happens. Happens all the time, and a lot of the time, these cases hit the news headlines when there are a sort of a large enough story to tell. Most of the time, they go unreported.
oh, Nottingham. Oh, a prosecution by the Office of Rail and Road. I mean,
Yeah,
that's a bit scary, that isn't it?
it is. And
Um,
when you follow that case, you realise that it boiled down to something really simple. They didn't manage driver safety, and therefore they won't have considered driver fatigue. And they had a driver who made a bad choice. He'd done a long journey with a colleague, a long day to actually do the job, traveled back late at night, fell asleep at the wheel, collided with a lorry. He and his colleague lost their lives. And the judge basically said, you failed to have measures in place to manage driver safety, and in particular, driver fatigue.
and that's important, right? I mean, the number of times, and I hold my hand up to this, that I ended up leaving early in the morning, driving too long, and my eyes dropping, having those little micro
Yeah,
sleeps. And you can see there, Danny, bless him. Thank you, Danny. A tip and news story for reference. There in the comments, you can see
yeah,
uh,
that's the one.
that's the one. That's the one. Thank you for that, Danny.
Yeah,
And I could actually see here, Control C. Let me just type a message in here so you can see it. Um, let's see what we've got here. Show. That looks like it's a big one, actually. Safety Management Magazine.
yeah.
Okay. Fatigued workers.
And
And
here's the thing: when things go wrong, there's all sorts of different media get hold of this, don't they? All the social media channels, the different
mm,
newspapers, the different trade presses. So unfortunately, when you Google that poor old company, Renowned Consultants, who I'm sure do some great stuff, you're going to get all the wrong information back and what went horribly wrong for them. So, your brand and the damage to your brand is also something very important to protect.
yeah, I mean, brand second, people first, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And just to
S
put things into context, Roy, I looked at the latest stats for casualties in the UK, and they're always about 18 months out of date. Well, it's 18 months until they're ratified. So the latest figures were that we've got over 131,000 casualties a year happening on the road network. That means every 22 minutes, somebody somewhere is involved in a collision. Around about 1,600 people will lose their lives every year. And if you look out your window at any of the vehicles at any time in the day, a quarter of all of those are involved in a work related journey. Okay. So a quarter of those statistics, you could argue, will involve somebody driving for either themselves, their business, or their employer. So it happens, and it's happening all the time.
So, I mean, really, I mean, without scaring our viewer to death,
Yeah.
um, and me. We're coming to the sort of sliding doors moment here. You choose to get on top of this, or you don't.
Mm.
And this is interesting because um, clearly anyone above five, there's a lot of companies with above five people in them. That's fine. Is there any studies to say the sort of stuff that you do, what percentage of companies have it all together? Have it all sort of tied up? Because you can't work with everyone. I mean,
No.
I know you're very busy and you've got some great clients, but you can't work with everyone. What sort of percentage? If we look at a quarter of all vehicles are on work-related stuff, and just thinking aloud, and I could be way off, but we could be talking 10 million vehicles out there.
Yeah.
I don't know, 5 million vehicles out there on a work-related business every day,
Yeah.
and I know the average size, if you get everyone together, of companies is only around 30, even if you include the big ones. There's so many small ones.
Mm. Mm.
Um, What sort of percentage of those? Are there any studies saying what percentage of those have got it all covered and got their drives protected and done the right thing for their business?
Yeah, there are some examples that we see in our professional trade journals of businesses that do it really well. But similarly, we very often find that when they do their own research, they find that probably around about a third of the businesses they poll have what we would recognize as good governance over driver safety. Some have absolutely nothing, and some believe that they've got everything in place until we start to stress test it a little bit. So, whilst there aren't any exact figures that will say X number of businesses do this right, I think it's safe to say that there are probably far more that don't than do, and won't be aware that they don't, maybe because nothing bad has happened. And if something bad was to happen, that's when the investigations start to probe a little bit. Then you realize, oh, I should have a risk assessment. I should have a policy. I should have a handbook. I should license check. I should train. I should keep records of vehicle safety checks. And we have people who drive their own vehicles. Yes, we need to make sure they're taxed, MOT'd, insured, etc. So there's lots of stuff. Remember that piece of the jigsaw puzzle I talked about?
Mm.
Just listed a load of the parts that come together. So essentially, what I do is make sure that we've got those parts of the jigsaw puzzle present, B, we've got a picture to work from, and when we connect them, we make sure that process works well.
I mean, that sounds to me, and I'm again just guessing, so correct me. That sounds to me all of those things, pulling it all together for all your members of staff, getting it all lined up, filed in the right place, so you know what your staff are doing, your company's protected, the staff are protected. That sounds to me at least a couple of weeks solid work.
No, not really, because my job is to take the pain away from that process. So, for example, you can go on to the Health and Safety Executive website, and they have a section specifically for driving at work. You can download a risk assessment, and they'll tell you what sort of stuff should go into a policy. So, the layperson will sit there with a white piece of paper and a pen, and you'll be scratching your head thinking, okay, what do I know? How do I need to start? Well, I've done that so many times for my clients, so I know how to create a risk assessment quickly for you. We can add on those peculiar things that the business might do that I won't have thought about or won't have come across. I will create the driver safety policy for you, and then we'll have a conversation to hone that to make sure it fits your operational practices and preferences. And then I'll talk you through what the introduction process is. How do we make sure that everybody within the business is singing off that hymn sheet that is our driver risk management program? And very often I find it's the communication thing that's the part that isn't done well. We've got a great policy and a great risk assessment, but nobody knows about it. So how do we take our staff on that journey? And it's not rocket science. And I could typically take a business from zero to having a good driver safety program within 2 to 3 weeks if they're able just to commit that little bit of time to reach those milestones that we need. In
So they've got
reality,
to contribute as well, and
they
so yeah,
they do, but it's
yeah.
not hugely onerous task on their side, because my that's what I do. My job is to take that pain away.
Mm.
You know,
And so we keep the CEO out of jail, but what do the members of staff see? What's in it for them?
well, there should be a lot in it for everybody, really. The first and foremost thing is, I mean, this day and age now, we want to make sure that if we've got good staff, we want to keep hold of them, don't we? So having a good driver risk management program in place is a demonstration of an investment in their safety, first and foremost. And it sets a framework by which people can understand what is expected of them by their employer, and in return, what the employer is expected to do for them as an individual. So it's things like not insisting that they do answer that mobile phone call when they're driving, not putting unrealistic time schedules on them. It's things like, I am able to book an overnight stop rather than have to return home after a long journey. So it's just that framework that would set out a safe way of working for the employee. And you know what? If the business are really forward thinking and they introduce some form of driver reward scheme. Now, I'm going to be very careful here, because some businesses say, why on earth would I want to reward somebody for doing what they're expected to do in the first place? But we human beings sometimes will very much play ball if there's something in it for us. So if we were to introduce some form of driver reward scheme, it could be an extra day's holiday, it might be monetary, it just might be a league table. You're going to get staff buying into that, and they'll see that there's actually some value for me as an individual as well. And what happens is that drives costs down to the business. So next time you go to insure your fleet, you go to your underwriter and say, look, we've got a much healthier fleet than we had before. Let's talk about our policy and let's talk about our excess. So there's benefits all around.
So there is some payback as well. I mean, I listen to what you're saying, and the interest in the dynamic of people. When they join a company up to that point, this point they hit the payroll. At the start, this point is, how do I, as a potential employee, convince you to put me on the payroll? And you get on the payroll, yay, happy days. And then you get to the other side of that line, and the dynamic changes where the people start looking at the company and going, what are they doing to make me want to stay? Should I stay with this organization? And I was reading a thing by Deloitte. There's 570,000 unfilled roles.
Wow.
People have a choice.
Yeah.
And I think working for an organization that actively cares and actively does something to make sure that they are looked after while doing their job, they're a far more attractive proposition than the ones that don't. And actually, it should be a question. I'm going to have to drive. What are your driving policies?
Yeah. I mean, statistically, driving is one of the most dangerous things we all do on a day-by-day basis. We're far more likely to get injured on the road network than we are, being involved in our favorite adrenaline sport, or more people are injured driving for work than they are on high-risk industries such as sort of oil exploration and building sites and things like that. So I think we've a right to make sure that we have a safe working environment. And I really take my hat off to any business that is going to be able to say, and we are very keen to make sure that one of the most dangerous activities we ask you to do, driving, we put everything in place to keep you as safe as we can. There's a few things we're going to ask you to do. There's a lot of stuff that we can do. I think that's a great thing to do.
I think it's a great sort of hiring comment and retaining staff approach, and looking at, say, from a management point of view, because I don't fully understand it. I would just hire you to do it.
Yeah.
We've only got a couple of minutes left. I'd just like to ask a couple of questions. I mean, what got you into this? Because, I mean, when you was at school doing the career fairs, And I mean, you didn't say I want to go into driver risk management.
Not at all.
Said no one ever, right?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I wanted to go in the RAF and be a reconnaissance pilot. So yeah, what got me into this? Well, if you wind the clocks back 34 years, I became a driving instructor, and had 13 very enjoyable years teaching people to drive. I then went to work for my local authority and had 13 years. There's 13-year cycles here. I don't know what that's telling.
Mm-hmm.
And I had 13 years working for a local authority, and it was there I really got interested into driver risk management. Left the local authority, went to work for a private road safety company. They had a management buyout. Private equity investors came in. The landscape changed, and I saw an opportunity to leave and set up my own business, which I've done for 4 years. So I've kind of morphed from a driving instructor to being interested in driver safety in the wider sense, then starting to specialize in business and business driving. And how I work with businesses. So yeah, I've been doing this in one guise or another for 34 years now. God, that makes me feel old.
Yeah, well, what can I say? So, Adrian, we're coming to the end of this, and it's been very interesting, and I think as attracting new members of staff, retaining members of staff, keeping them safe, doing the right thing, and more importantly, getting out of jail free. We're coming to that sliding doors moment again. They can either carry on the way that they are, or they can email you at.
So it's Adrian at adrianhideconsultancy.co.uk. So Hyde is spelled H-I-D-E. So that's Adrian at adrianhideconsultancy.co.uk.
Did you want to share? Did you want to share your mobile, or shall
Yes,
I?
I'm very happy to do that, which is 07973 337 251. 07973 337 251.
Fantastic. Is there anything else you want to add? We've got a couple of minutes left. Is there anything you want to add?
No, I suppose not really, other than, if there's any businesses out there that are wondering, will this happen to me? Just remember those stats I told you about, 1,500 people every year being killed on the road network. A quarter of those are work related. They might just possibly work for you. You just don't know. So don't leave it to chance. Have a look at what you can do to keep a safe driving culture.
There's no winding back, right? Once these things happen, you can't just go back and reset it. You're in the doo-doo bar then.
Yeah, I mean, there are two worst case scenarios when things go wrong. The best of the worst case scenario is you receive a fine, which is based on your turnover, starting at around about 20%. That's going to hurt. And the worst case scenario is if there's a fatality involved, then potentially the charges could be corporate manslaughter. But I would much prefer to work with a business that says, we care about our staff and we want to do the right thing. Because then by default, you'll do the rest. Rather than, I don't want to go to jail, what do I have to do?
I think that gets the focus, right?
Yeah.
So we're keeping you out of jail today. Sliding doors moment. Adrian, it was great. And I knew it would be great because I spoke to you many times before. But thank you very much for coming on. And Adrian at adrianhideconsultancy.co.uk, and whatever that number was we mentioned earlier. Something's happened. There we go. A comment from Danny before we go. Let's see what he says. Accidents are going to happen. Mitigating the risk and having clear processes for when they do to protect everyone.
Yeah.
I love the way you think, Danny. Thank you very much. Take care, everyone. Adrian, thanks very much, mate. I'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah, will do. Right. Goodbye, everybody. Have a great evening. Stay cool, stay safe.